Gang, what's up? Aaron here at Kennedy and Looney. We're going to launch into a wicked Wednesday morning. Sid Sixero is pissed off at Doug Ford. He gets fired for it. We've got committee meetings coming up. MAID is on the table. Oh man, and she's getting bent over. It's a rough time. We've got some great clips from a very interesting Operations and Governance Committee, OGO Committee. Let's jump right in. Let's get into it.
Last week to the media after he made his.
Here we go.
The premier of this province flat out lied last week to the media after he made his. I stood shoulder to shoulder with the Prime Minister on the Emergencies Act thing. He was asked, had he been requested to show up? He said no. That's not true, because according to the committee, from September 19th and on, numerous times, the Premier and the acting Solicitor General at the time, Sylvia Jones, were asked to voluntarily show up and testify. So what he said last week was not true, and he was pretty brazen about that. Secondly, to not show up to question period yesterday, if you can't take question period on this topic in Ontario, you're going to get eaten alive in front of that commission. That was a cowardly move yesterday by our Minister of Health and our Premier. And I don't think we'll see them there today, Tammy. I got to be honest with you. If you can't take that yesterday, you're probably not showing up today. And I know that personally because, and not many people know this, we've had an open invitation for this Premier to show up in studio or on Zoom at any time since January of this year to talk to myself,
Sid is pissed off,
or anyone else involved with the show. Feathers, crickets. If he's afraid of us, he wants nothing to do with that committee. That's a fact. One last thing on our Premier. One of the things he really doesn't want to do is have a long-form discussion with anyone with cameras rolling. Because right now he lives in a world, and a lot of our politicians do, to be fair, when you face the media, it's one question and a follow. Remember the days, Tammy, where you can follow up with a question with a politician, when you can have a long-form interview? Right now, Doug Ford lives in the world, and a lot of politicians do, of one question and a follow-up. That has hurt our democracy. And if he goes to that commission in Ottawa, he's going to sit there for 7 to 8 hours, unfiltered, with cameras rolling. That is Doug Ford's nightmare. That is his campaign manager's nightmare. He does not want to do that. It is an insult to anyone in this province that anyone who runs for public office does not want to deal with the things that come with public office. If the Prime Minister is going to have to testify, if our Minister of Public Safety, if the former police chief in Ottawa, if the outgoing mayor in Ottawa all have to testify about those protests, Doug Ford in his province has to testify, because the question is, was it justified in enacting that Emergencies Act? We don't know what's happening in Ontario before we get to that final answer. This is outrageous to me that he's doing this. This is outrageous. He's not going to get his way. His butt's going to be in that seat at some point in front of that commission. And the more he fights this, the worse it looks. Go ahead, Tam. Forgive me.
Just to give you some context as well, he's fighting it and saying that there is parliamentary privilege. So basically that doesn't compel MPPs or anyone in politics to testify if, in fact, they are within a sitting. It doesn't compel them to do so in a proceeding where the legislature is in session at the moment, or 40 days before and after a session.
Is Sid right on, guys? Let me know. Is he way off? Who knows?
And so this is something that's going to be argued there on their side. Yep. They want to be able to conduct business and have that privilege as well, so that they don't have to,
That's what they're arguing.
Yeah.
We'll see how that plays out next Tuesday. Frank, good morning.
Hey, good morning, guys. Interesting discussion there. The other part, too, is the Ford political brand was always built on accessibility of public, that they would always answer the call, always be there to speak.
Yeah. Well, not that long ago, I heard the Premier said, let's get it done. Here he doesn't want to get it done, apparently. He wants nothing to do with that committee. So we'll see how it plays out. He's not getting his way on this. He's going to testify. With each passing day that stays in the headlines, it's worse for him.
In Canadian federal politics, the Canucks are represented by two separate yet unequal groups. The globalists who sold out and the opposition trying to salvage a country. These are their stories.
Our questions. Mr. Patzer, you're up for 6 minutes, please. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thank you very much, everybody, for joining us here today. We appreciate the time. Just going to jump right into it then. When Finance...
This is the OGLE committee. It's the operations committee. They investigate like how the government operates, and Jeremy Patzer has the best mustache you're going to find on Parliament Hill.
Called for the spending review, which has led to layoffs. Did you advise departments to make sure cuts would be proportionate between the national capital and the other regions of Canada?
Thank you for the question. Just to say up front, I'm new in this position. I've been in this position for 2.5 months. I'll defer some of my questions to Thomas LaRue. She's our Director General of Budget Planning and obviously predates me at the department, so we'll be able to go deeper into some of the questions you'll be posing this afternoon. I don't believe there was any particular direction on kind of regional proportions associated with the proposed spending reductions.
Okay, and then do you guys in finance, or do you know if anybody in the government gives a directive on what a rural lens would look like? And do you have a definition that you use for rural?
Go ahead, Tom.
Thank you. It's a good question. So we don't have, what I will say is in the exercise, the comprehensive expenditure review, the directive was for departments to use gender-based analysis plus. Gender-based analysis plus looks at impact on a variety of stakeholders across demographic characteristics. It could include rural, but it's not a specific rural lens. The idea is that in doing their comprehensive expenditure review proposals, departments would be looking at these impacts, preparing the analysis, and that has been submitted with the proposal. So that would be the extent to which rural impacts would be factored in, but there is no separate rural lens applied per se.
And did you say that the GBA Plus lens is your department did, or were all departments across the entirety of the government instructed to use that lens?
So it would be all departments. So right, it was guidelines, directives that were provided. There were templates issued by the Treasury Board Secretariat, and when departments were preparing the proposals, they had to complete this analysis and submit it. This is not Department of Finance who did it on behalf of proponents. It's the proponents themselves.
Okay, interesting. Yeah, there was other folks here in this study earlier who said that lens was actually not applied in many cases. So I find that to be interesting. Do you think that departments should consider the return on investment for spending items before deciding to cut them?
I'm sorry, like for every dollar saved, there would be a return on that dollar saved in terms of what? If you just unpack that for me.
No, not necessarily that. More so like, I mean, obviously the government spends a lot of money, and when they spend money, are they getting a return on that investment, right? So I'm just curious to know if that's a consideration for the government and for your department when you're going through cuts. Were people looking to see if there was actually a good return on the investment of the item that they were cutting before they cut it?
I guess, my expectation was that departments in submitting their proposals and central agencies, whether it be the Treasury Board Secretariat or the Department of Finance, when reviewing those proposals, would have assessed the lowest performing, lowest efficiency programs for reduction. So the higher efficiency and higher performing programs, i.e. if there was a higher return on investment, whatever that return unit would have been, social returns, economic returns, would have been held harmless.
And then, so would you consider, say, a 32-to-1 ROI a good return?
Well, I mean, if I was in the private sector and I was giving a 32-to-1 ROI, I'd be pretty excited. But in terms of whatever that return metric is in the departmental program setting, I'm sorry, sir, it's hard for me to assess.
Okay, no, I was just curious because the Department of Agriculture, the cuts to the research and to the research stations. Agriculture has a 32-to-1 return on investment for the investment in research, and we're seeing drastic cuts. And one of the hardest hit departments in cuts is the research side of agriculture. And the University of Saskatchewan has also confirmed that there's a return of investment of 32-to-1, and in some cases greater than that on investment in research for agriculture. So I would just strongly encourage that going forward, that return on investment actually seriously be looked at and considered and going forward. Now, I just wanted to ask you a question. You know, despite the CERs, it's been reported that that finance has had the biggest year-over-year increase in budgetary spending. And that just has something to do with higher interest payments on our national debt. Can you tell us how much today you'll be spending on interest charges this year?
Well, in the budget, we would project interest charges. Tomorrow, you can help me with this.
This year, 60.
25-26 year that we just closed
He needs to get ChatGPT or some AI.
was 55.6 billion, and this coming year, the 26-27 year, is 60 billion, as projected in budget 2025.
Does it worry you that that number keeps going up and up?
Does it worry me?
Yeah.
I mean, yeah. I mean, that's what I'm paid to do, is be very worried about our fiscal framework. So, you know, lower public debt charges is better than higher public debt charges. I would admit that.
Yeah. Okay. So how on earth are we going to get to a path where we can actually lower that? Now, I know there's some fancy words about, you know, a stable level, but stable doesn't mean it's going down. And if it's ever increasing, that's not good. How are we going to get it lower?
I mean, there's listen, I'm not going to like wave my hands here. There's different ways to define lower. Lower is a percentage, is a proportion of your economy, so as a percentage GDP. And in that context, public debt charges are trending lower. But just on a nominal value basis, I mean, I admit they're going higher. And
thank you very much. Thanks. We'll go to Mr. Hlan. Welcome to Olga, Mr. Hlan.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to the officials for being here. Will this spending review reduce the deficit?
Give a thumbs up for our man, Jasraj Halan. I find him entertaining. Like, watch him.
The spending review itself will not reduce the deficit.
Okay. I just wanted to confirm, because the Secretary of the Treasury Board also admits the same thing, that this would most likely not reduce the deficit. What would be the point of the review then if we're not reducing costs for Canadians?
From my perspective, just, you know, as a bureaucrat advising ministers, I mean, it provides an opportunity to reallocate, you know, from some programs and services towards others.
But one would think that we have such a massive deficit. This government has doubled the deficit since the last Prime Minister left, Justin Trudeau. That to be responsible, one might think that the review would be in one part to reduce costs, and that's not happening, obviously. So again, like, what would be the point of that? What's the point of the review?
Well, I mean, just the blueprint is to stop doing some things and do more of others. I mean, quite frankly. So the intent and spirit of intent, I think, of the process was to reallocate away from low-performing, low-priority programs, and take the proceeds of the savings associated with that, and allocate towards other initiatives and other priorities.
And it wouldn't be savings, correct? I mean, we're just spending it somewhere else.
No, I mean, I totally admit on net, there's no net savings to the fiscal framework.
What is the interest on the debt?
If I understand the question, I think I answered that is it's projected to be $60 billion this year.
Right. And can you tell me what goes to healthcare transfers to the provinces?
I don't want to get this wrong, because the health transfer for the 26-27 year, so this fiscal year, is $57.4 billion.
Okay. So we're basically, because of the spending of the government, of the Liberals, there's more money going to the interest on the debt that Canadians have to pay than what's going to healthcare transfers. So bankers and bondholders are getting more money than doctors and nurses, right? Is that how I'm reading it? Am I correct in that?
Yeah, I'm fearful for you to put words in my mouth, but I would agree just on the nominal value of public debt charges versus the nominal value of the Canada Health Transfer. Yes, sir. That's the dynamic.
Right. And is that concerning to you at all, that more money is going to interest on the debt than it is to healthcare transfers for the provinces?
I mean, what I can say is these public debt charges are associated with, you know, I guess, what, $1.5 trillion in marketable debt. I mean, that debt is associated with however many generations of decisions by current and previous governments.
Right. But would it not be more responsible in a time like we are right now, Because at the end of the day, who's going to be paying for that debt? It is Canadians and generations of Canadians, and in the form of taxes, most likely. Would it not be more responsible for us to, let's say, find savings wherever there's wasteful spending, so we can bring down the deficit? Would that be something that would make a little bit more sense?
I think from my perspective, it's that deficits are sustainable, that our debt load is manageable, and that there's a fiscal track that can demonstrate some level of fiscal sustainability.
The reason why I bring that up is because in certain people in Canada are paying more in taxes now than they are for all the necessities combined, housing, clothing, and we're hearing about 2.2 million Canadians going into a food bank in a single month. So whether it's sustainable or not, at the end of the day, it's the taxpayer, it's the Canadians that are having to take on that burden. So that's why would you think it would be more responsible to help lower that pressure on Canadians rather than piling on more and finding savings, let's say, for within this review?
And I think, what do I think? What do I know? I mean, I know there was this process was an effort to make sure that government was operating as efficiently as it could, that programs and services that were low performing, that maybe would be considered wasteful, were eliminated, and the proceeds of that exercise was reallocated to other programs and services. So I don't want to be argumentative, sir. I agree with the principle of what you like.
Yeah, that's so. Glad. Okay.
Thanks,
That's
Mrs.
too
Jensen,
bad.
please.
Thumbs up for Joss Rajlan, one of my favorites.
Mr. Leswick, it's very refreshing to hear you talk about, two sides to a coin, so that's wonderful. Now, I wonder, I want to start by taking us back for a moment. So when I sat on Finance Committee, we studied the fallout from the Panama Papers, one of the largest financial leaks in history. And what did we hear at that time? We heard that billions of dollars were being routed through shell companies, hidden in offshore jurisdictions, shielded from transparency, and in many cases beyond the reach of enforcement. We heard plain as day that Canada really had a problem, and not a small one, a structural one. So the agency at the center of that fight is FINTRAC. This is the body responsible for tracking suspicious financial transactions, identifying money laundering, and passing intelligence to law enforcement. It's literally the follow the money agency. So here's my problem. At the very moment when financial crime is becoming more sophisticated, when we're dealing with fentanyl trafficking, organized crime, sanctions evasions, international capital flows, we're now talking about cuts to FINTRAC. Cuts. So I just want to connect it to something a little bit more recent. So we've seen repeated concerns about Canadian money, pension money, investment capital flowing through offshore jurisdictions like Bermuda or the Cayman Islands. And we know that Brookfield, who our Prime Minister is linked to, has investment structures involving offshore jurisdictions. To be clear, offshore structures are not automatically illegal, but that's exactly the point. That's what we learned from the Panama Papers, that the issue isn't always illegality, it's lack of transparency. Now, it's the ability to move money through complex structures where ownership is obscured, tax obligations are minimized, and accountability becomes optional. And that's precisely the space that FINTRAC is supposed to monitor. So let me ask the obvious question. How can we possibly claim to be serious about financial transparency when we're making cuts to the very agency tasked with detecting suspicious financial flows? When it comes to the actual enforcement capacity, we're pulling back. It seems to me it's like installing a state-of-the-art alarm system and firing the security guard. So here's my question to the officials. If FINTRAC is expected to do more, track more transactions, enforce higher penalties, monitor increasingly complex financial flows, how can it do it with fewer resources?
Yes, and thank you for the question. And to be honest, I feel vulnerable here saying really anything about FINTRAC without FINTRAC actually at the table, speaking to how they would have affected their proposed reductions. But I would agree with the premise of your question in terms of, FinTrack's accountability on intelligence and supervision, in particular around AML, like anti-money laundering and anti-terrorist financing, and its general surveillance around just suspicious transactions, whether they be in offshore tax havens or moving money in and out of money services businesses. I mean, the list goes on. They're not at the table, so I can't speak on where they would have sourced their savings proposals. I mean, all I can say is I would hope that an organization like FinTrack, and I'm not speaking necessarily about FinTrack, would have not reduced its resourcing from areas of that enormous priority that you outlined.
I know at the time when we were doing the study on FinTrack, they were very clear they are already under-resourced. So to me, this makes absolutely no sense that they're going to even have less resources. So I'm concerned about what message it sends to those that are trying to hide their money. I mean, move money, launder money through our system. Like we're saying, we were under-resourced already. You can look it up on Hansard. And now we're taking even further funds away.
I share your concern, and I'm not going to sugarcoat it. I mean, our expectation of FinTrack and any other organization is where they could have found, their savings and potential like administrative efficiencies. And I know that sounds very generic, but in an organization like FinTrack, where they receive tens and hundreds of thousands of suspicious transaction reports, I mean, that's their bread and butter. Like, how many people, are there systems, are there efficiencies, are there thresholds, are there ways that you could be working with financial institutions in order to economize that effort? I mean, that's the spirit of, I think, what was trying to, the spirit of this exercise, but I don't want to dilute your point in terms of the message that you're sending and the importance of FinTrack's work.
So I come from Vancouver, close to Vancouver. I'm about an hour out. And if there's one thing that we've learned, it's the money laundering through housing, through the opioids, through the casinos. Honestly, it blows my mind from the location where I come from, the damage that has been done in that area, and that now we're going to have less oversight because we're going to have less money going to FinTrack, which was, like I say, and I think that was 5 years ago, was already under-resourced. It doesn't make sense to me. We can see that our Canadian, the fabric of our society is being hurt by this, and FinTrack is getting less money.
Yeah, I would completely agree. And the chairman, Mr. Magali, has often cautioned me about the separation between government and officials like me at these committees. So what I'll say is not a plug for the government or the minister, but the minister is absolutely seized with what you just said. I mean, he made an appearance in Surrey. He has a very perspective on this follow the money strategy. He was in Surrey a few weeks ago. He was in Brantford. He's completely seized with the point that you're making, and he's deployed FinTrack in that context.
Anybody believe that?
To me, that makes no sense. 5 years ago, they were already under-resourced. So that's the last of my statements is just there's less money and there's more trouble. So I don't see this working.
And all I can say is maybe I can show up at this committee 6 months from now and with FinTrack and talk about the progress in the area that you're talking about specifically and the resourcing associated with that. Just my commitment to you and the committee.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Hopefully it'll be FinTrack and you, not FinTrack and Mythos.
Thank you very much, Chair, and welcome here, I guess.
How about Cowgirl Kelly Block? Giddy up, Cowgirl.
Congratulations on this new role as Deputy Minister, if you've been here for a couple of months. I want to circle back to the line of questioning by my colleague, Mr. Halan, regarding the cost of our national debt, noting that under Justin Trudeau, it doubled, and that the current Prime Minister plans to spend even more than the previous government had projected they were going to spend, which I believe results in yet higher deficits and higher costs for Canadians. After all, today's deficits are tomorrow's taxes. And so I guess my question for you, Mr. Leswick, is in your role as the Deputy Minister, what lessons have you or are you learning from the Comprehensive Expenditure Review that can be applied to future spending and future reviews? And are you developing a plan to reduce the deficit if not in the short term, in the medium or long term?
And thank you for the question. I mean, to be quite honest, the comprehensive expenditure review, I mean, it was a substantive exercise. Like when you position it against other expenditure review processes, whether that's the deficit reduction action plan under Prime Minister Harper, or the program review era, even in the late 90s. I mean, this was a substantive exercise. I mean, as a bit of a fiscal framework junkie, it is a demonstration that these types of reallocations can happen in government, not without consequence. I mean, programs are eliminated, stakeholders, employees associated with those programs are affected 100%. But I think it does demonstrate that, and I'm just speaking from like a small g government perspective, that we can, departments, bureaucracy can reallocate. And there's not this complete political abyss that doesn't allow us to do so. So that is one lesson learned, at least from my perspective. With respect to your second question, I mean, the best I can say is that we provide the government with options, and this government's been pretty clear that it wants to keep the deficit to GDP ratio on a downward trajectory. The deficits are sustainable in relation to our economy, and so we're conscious of that. And so, any spending proposals or tax related proposals that we bring forward are within the context of that fiscal guardrail that is set out for itself.
Thank you for that. Having been a member of Parliament for almost 18 years and serving on this committee now for the third time, I would suggest that obviously our budgeting cycle allows for the reallocation of funds within a department on a regular basis. If you look at supplementary estimates and the processes that we have there. So I'm going to go back to the purpose of the comprehensive expenditure review. If it was simply just about the ability to reallocate money, I think that was already there. But my question would be, how often does the Department of Finance plan to undertake similar spending reviews in the future? Is this going to become a regular practice for the government? And to what end, if not to start to address the deficit and the debt load that Canadians are carrying?
Yes. I mean, with respect to your first observation, I mean, I do have to say, I feel like, and other deputies that you have at this table should provide their own testimonial, but I do feel like departments feel like they're in a bit of a straitjacket, notwithstanding that they would have legal flexibility within their vote structure in order to reallocate across programs. I think once governments make announcements and they establish, those allocations against particular grants and contributions programs, they feel very hamstrung to make, or very constrained to make any reallocations between those programs, even though they exist within a single vote as determined by parliamentarians. So I think they only make these reallocations, if I'm just being honest, is under the cover of a government-wide exercise. And so I think these types of exercises give departments the opportunity to put forward reallocation proposals. At least that's just my perspective. In terms of your second question, deputies, and I'm a deputy of my own department, have certain license to make reallocations. I think without the cover of a government effort, like that you would see launched in a budget or an update, I don't think that. I think it's very difficult to do such. And so I don't know that you'll see another one of these types of expenditure review proposals set in motion until the government of the day, and that's right now under my minister and the Prime Minister would set that in motion. So there's nothing that we're working on right now.
Wonderful.
Thank you.
Thanks. We'll finish up with. Thank you very much. We'll start with Mr. Caputo. Mr. Caputo, welcome to Ogo. 6 minutes.
Thank you very much,
Let's
Mr.
go.
Chair. Thank you to all of our witnesses, Monsieur Lebeau, Mr. McKinnon. I've obviously had a lot of dealings with UCO, and I want to welcome you both to your new positions. We haven't had a chance to meet formally in.
Smash that like, hit subscribe, gang. Frank Caputo's fun to watch. Like, in a variety of
Committee.
ways.
Mr. McKinnon, I'm going to direct some questions towards you, and Mr. Lebeau, feel free to weigh in. Drones are a huge issue and directly impact officer safety, correct?
That's
yes. In fact, they drop contraband, they drop drugs, they drop ceramic blades, things like that that can be used to stab officers. Is that right?
That's correct.
And we are going to, in fact, there's such a problem, and drugs in jail are such a problem that we've seen a number of impacts. In fact, are you familiar with Fraser Valley Institution, Mr. McKinnon?
Yes, sir.
And were you aware, or can you comment on a program, I'm not sure if you're aware of the program, in which dogs are brought to Fraser Valley Institution where inmates tend to them and things like that? Are you aware of such a program?
Yes, I am aware of the program.
And were you aware that a dog actually overdosed on narcotics, I was told? Is that accurate?
I can't speak to that. I'm not aware of that.
Okay, that's just what I was told. What percentage of job cuts are management versus frontline for CSC?
That's a good question. We can talk about ETP, FTEs. On our side, we're talking about more than 100 correctional officer that's going to lose some FTEs at the end of this exercise. It's massive. We talk about security. We talk about patrol, the mobile patrol, SIU services. So it's a lot. It's a lot of CX that is going to be affected with those.
How many jobs are being eliminated from regional headquarters? Any idea?
No.
As in we haven't been told, or zero, or both?
I don't know. We don't know the answer.
Okay. I'll assume zero if you haven't been told. How about national headquarters? How many jobs have been were set to be cut from NHQ?
That's a good question. They didn't inform.
Well, I think they didn't inform because it's zero. Would it be fair to say that the Correctional Service of Canada is a bureaucracy at the national headquarters and regional headquarters level?
It's a huge organization, and at the end of the day, their CSC is having RHQ and HQ. There's a lot of people who's working there. It's pretty hard for us to comment on how many people are working here in Ottawa or even in the region. Our core business for us, correctional officer, we're dealing with stuff inside the institution. So it's pretty hard to me to say, yes, there's a lot of people or enough or too much. So I cannot comment on this one.
Okay. Now, in terms of safety and security of officers, I mean, I've been to a number of institutions. I worked for federal corrections. This is a vulnerability in part because of small things like the unwillingness of the CSE to supply razor blades that disintegrate. I think you probably know what I'm talking about. There are razor blades out there that if you go to use them as a weapon, they will disintegrate. CSE doesn't supply those. I know that officer safety is a big issue, and now when it comes to drones and detection technology, CSC is cutting those types of things to intercept contraband. Will that ultimately make officers more safe or less safe?
Absolutely, will make officers less safe. We're having drones on a daily basis across our institution, like coast to coast. We're having assault on a daily basis. Correctional officer has been assaulted. There's not a single day I'm not receiving a phone call from the Monitor Center telling me that, Fred, okay, there's an officer has been assaulted in Kent. There's an officer has been also assaulted in Donnacona. We have in the last month, we had 3 murders in Donnacona.
This is just, I'm going to just speak. Normally I would like to ask questions, but I've got 1 minute left, and I will say this. Being a correctional officer is one of the most difficult occupations. It's one of the bravest occupations. The fact that you have to go to jail and worry about being stabbed by contraband that could be detected by drone and is not, and you have to live through that, putting your lives on the line for a salary that is substantially lower than other peace officers, to me, is repugnant. And the fact that the government is cutting those things that would help protect you and not cutting an ounce of bureaucracy, the government should be ashamed. Thank you.
You have more time.
I apologize.
apologize, Mr. Caputo. I reduced it by 1 minute. Yeah, 1 more minute.
Oh, but I just ended so well. Okay. Do you have anything to say to that?
No, it's a tough job, and you're right. And nobody decide to become as a child to become correctional officer. It's a passion. We are working near each community across Canada, and it's a tough job. You're right. It's not an easy one, and for sure, when we're cutting, when CSC telling us, the government's telling us that they're cutting 132.2 million, it's afraid us. It's worrying. For sure.
Yes. Now, people who assault you, when people do assaults, it used to be that they would go to higher security or the SHU, the Special Handling Unit. Is that the case anymore?
It is, but it's more complicated and very complicated to get to the SHU at the end of the day.
And sometimes we have a modified segregation unit, the SIU, which an inmate can only stay for 60 days. But what does CSC do? They actually just transfer them to another jail. Is that right? And they do that by charter plane, which costs millions a year.
Absolutely.
Is that right?
There's probably an economy of cost to do there, for sure.
They are literally transferring inmate from jail to jail because an inmate can only stay in the SIU for up to 60 days. So rather than reintegrate them by law, they will literally just put them in a new jail and say, look, we took them out of the SIU. So they go from province to province, region to region on charter aircraft. Is that accurate?
In some case, yes, and we need to keep that tool. It's very important because we need to keep a kind of in coma segregation because it's like the same thing like in the community. If you're not having police quarter, you're will be in danger.
Waste of money to transfer inmates by charter aircraft from jail to jail just to comply with unworkable regulations.
Thanks, gentlemen, and I apologize for cutting you off early, Mr. Caputo. We made up for it by allowing you extra Patzer for 5.
So we're back to our man Tom Selleck, Jeremy Patzer. That's fun. But Frank Caputo is a very entertaining MP. He's gone up on my list of MPs that I find entertaining or the most entertaining by a couple of steps.
Thank you very much, everyone, for being here today. Ms. D'Souza, I'm just going to start with you. I'm just wondering, can you just confirm the committee that PSAC represents the workers at the border?
That is correct. We do.
Okay, and you mentioned in your opening remarks about the 26,000 cuts to the public service. I'm just wondering if you can elaborate a little bit on impacts for CBSA that is having.
Well, thank you. Right now, I can tell you that we've received information that roughly 447 workers at the Canada Border Service Agency have received workforce adjustment notification. What that translates to, we don't know. And the government has over the next 3 years to determine if there's further notification coming. Is there impacts? Yes, there are, because they're short staff already. We know, and when we're looking at the feeder groups to staff up officers, there's competition with RCMP, local police as well. And so we know the government has made a commitment to staff up by 1,000 officers. But then if you're in dire need of officers, why are you providing workforce adjustment notification? So it just doesn't make sense. And it concerns me because these are already trained. They've already gone through the rigorous training at Rigaud. And anyone who's gone through it knows one small infraction and you're kicked out. You don't move forward. So these are trained officers. These are people who are trained in the actual administration and support services. And many of them report to the National Capital Region. So my concern is, what are we really doing here? Are we looking at CBSA in an overall capacity? Are we looking at the future and what's required to support it? Or are we just doing an elimination exercise here? And that's how I really feel that's been happening with all the departments. The lack of review of the programs themselves.
Mrs. Johnson, please, and then we'll go to Ms. Khalid, and then back forth.
Thank you. I'm going to direct my question to Mr. McKinnon. last summer, I had the opportunity to visit the Matsqui Penitentiary with my colleague here, Mr. Caputo, and it became very clear that there was a problem there. They've already had multiple incidents where contraband is literally thrown over the fence. It's not smuggled in some sophisticated way. They just tossed it over like it was a backyard. And we're talking about packages landing inside the perimeter containing drugs, cell phones, even weapons. It got so bad there that they had to build a second fence to try and stop it. A second fence, like they would have to throw it harder in order to get it into the yard. That was their solution. And from what the officers are saying, it's not exactly Fort Knox. People are still finding ways around it because fences don't stop the problem. People do. Now, dog units do. Patrols do. Experienced correctional officers do. So what's the government's big idea when they're cutting? Like, are they going to cut searches? They're going to reduce patrols? The very things that actually catch this stuff before it spreads through the institution. And here's the part that I think that should concern every Canadian. When this contraband gets inside, it doesn't just sit there. It fuels violence. It creates debt. It drives intimidation. And the people standing in the middle of that storm are correctional officers. Men and women are already dealing with some of the highest PTSD rates in the country. And now we're making their job harder. So I have to ask, if we already can't stop drugs and weapons from getting over the fence, what exactly is the plan when they start removing the people responsible for catching them once they're in?
I think that the CSC wants to rely on technology. They want to rely on drone detection. They want to rely on perimeter security. And we're finding that the inmates are catching up with the technology faster than we can implement it. And therefore, it's becoming obsolete. And so, of course, the solution to that for us is boots on the ground. You talked about drug dog detectors, their footprint in the institutions being reduced, as well as a reduction of mobile patrols on the outside of the institution. Inmates are reverting to the throw-over method again, which is kind of went away for a little while with the introduction of drones. So now we're getting it in both drones, we're getting it in throw-overs, and we need the staff and the correctional officers on the ground to intervene in those instances.
When we visited, I have to say, employee morale was like at a maximum low. We heard that when they finally have downtime, they actually go online looking for another job. So admin basically was putting policies in place that put their lives at risk. I remember one of the places we went to where they allowed range lunch, like a mixed range lunch, where so that everybody could socialize. And they said that just immensely put much more risk on the officers. And I was really honestly shocked by the willful blindness of admin to put lives at risk like this. And I feel like this is just another one of those things. Can you please let me know, is it the same thing?
Yeah, I mean, I think you're talking about the reintroduction of meal line with the inmates, and of course, allowing for large gatherings like that, which hadn't happened for many years, increases the risk for officers. When you bring sometimes hundreds of inmates into gatherings like that, it increases the risks of incidents. It allows for the passing of contraband, and just overall risk to the correctional officers rises.
Yeah, they were really clear. They basically said it distracts them because they have too many people to watch. So someone can distract them over here while someone else attacks someone over there. And they willfully continued that practice. I don't know where that's at now, but I was shocked to see admin ignoring that, and as well shocked to see the low morale of the staff. So this, I can imagine, would make it even worse to have less staff.
Yeah, certainly. And I mean, morale for us is a big issue. You know, we talk about accountability within the walls of the institution for the inmates that work or that live there, and when they're not being held to account, it's very easy for morale to drop for correctional officers because they don't feel supported by the management group, and they feel like they're working against the grain.
That is absolutely what we heard. Thank you.
Thanks. We'll go to Ms. Khalid and then Mr. Boularice.
Thank you, Chair. Just quickly before I get into it,
we're only going to watch a minute.
Mr. Souza, in your remarks just now, you had talked about some 440 letters of termination that had been sent to frontline officers. Can you please help us understand? Because my understanding from public safety and from TBS is that that's not accurate.
She's really good at playing dumb. We're going to skip over this one and go to a new committee. They have a subcommittee on they're investigating the MAID program, and I'm just going to let them do the explanations. They've got a bunch of senators in a House of Commons committee, which I thought was pretty interesting. We'll skip to that.
And we'll move now to questions from senators.
Yeah, it's interesting, I think.
C'est mon travail maintenant. Alors, premièrement, Senator Delphine, vous avez 3 minutes pour les questions.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Alors, maybe to continue on what you just started and were answering to Monsieur Thériault, because I'm interested to know about the state of readiness. That was one of the main reasons last time. So I understand Alberta and Quebec are participating to these meetings, but they are not gearing up to be ready next year because their provinces will not be offering that service. All the other provinces and territories are working and are expecting to be in a position to offer that health service if the exemption was to expire next year. So when you said that training has been they have developed the standards that are required, the training is being delivered now. And what was the third part you referred to?
If I can respond, we have the MAID model practice standards, which were discussed at this committee in 2024. But further to that, the MAID curriculum that CAMAP is providing further to federal funding, participation has tripled over the past 2 years. So we have seen a definite increase in both, those who identify as having a specialty in psychiatry and general practitioners, and, tripled both in the number of clinicians accessing that training, those who identify with a specialty in psychiatry, and those who have completed the MAID module on mental health and MAID. I would also say that the Canadian Psychiatric Association guidance that I know has been discussed at this committee that was released publicly at the end of March, we had a very good conversation with provinces and territories just last week around the application of that guidance and how it will support our psychiatrists in understanding and assessing irremediability as well as suicidality. And so there is a new tool in the toolbox that was not there at the last time that we had this committee struck.
And for legal, understand from the charter statements that were released before that it will engage Section 15 if we are not, we prolong extending the exclusion, but that will be a test under Section 1 to see if it's reasonable to differ because of the state of readiness. Is that my understanding correct?
I think the government's position is as I said, that both permitting and prohibiting MAID can be in conformity with the charter, but be it Section 7 or 15, and of course both of those sections will be implicated, including Section 1. And so I think we've been pretty consistent throughout the years that from a legal perspective, we're in the same state of affairs. The key in any sort of litigation will be in setting out the evidence that you're relying on, whatever the legislature decides to do.
Thank you, Senator Delphine. Senator Martin, you have the floor for 3 minutes.
Thank you. My question is for Ms. Lawley. I had a stakeholder in my office this morning who's living with a physical disability. He was very concerned about how many times that some of his friends and people he knows living with disability have been offered MAID, and that he has lost many friends. So my first question is something hopefully very short, yes or no, and why not? The UN Committee on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities called on Canada to halt the 2027 mental illness expansion. The government tabled the report late, said nothing publicly, and 10 months later told a journalist it is still reviewing the recommendations. Can you tell this committee today, has the government formally responded to the UN recommendation to halt this expansion? And if not, why not?
The government has not responded to the UN Committee on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, mostly because every individual's end-of-life journey is different. And Track 2 is permitted in Canada through our criminal code. There are safeguards in our jurisdictions that are meant to support that. The expert panel on MAID did consider whether there should be additional legislative safeguards put in place for Track 2, and it did say more guidance was needed for clinicians, but, safeguards were in place.
The safeguards do not seem to be enough, and they're falling through the cracks, and it's a very dangerous situation for them. My second question is related to your December 25th, 2025 report related to the engagement with Indigenous communities, and I understand that not one Indigenous partner organization has endorsed readiness for this expansion. Would you comment on that, please? The status of the readiness of the Indigenous communities.
Of the readiness of the Indigenous communities, but I can comment on their very active engagement with us over the course of the 18 months in which we undertook our Indigenous engagement. And there's a very robust report on our website that we released last year that speaks to the fact that, a good number of Indigenous partners across the country did provide us with their perspectives on end-of-life care and the role of medical assistance in dying.
Did it not conclude that more consultations are needed before the exclusion expires in March 2027? Wasn't that one of the conclusions?
We are obviously continuing to engage with our Indigenous partners as part of our overall policy work in terms of providing recommendations to the Minister of Health and the Minister of Justice. But I would say for the purposes of this committee, there is not a standardized position across the country from our Indigenous partners, just like there is not a standardized position across this country from practitioners or people that live in the jurisdictions. It's a very complex and personal issue.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Moody, you have 3 minutes.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to direct my question to Ms. Lawley, and the question is around understanding the assessment of readiness that was made in the past. And we were told, and it's been MISUMC was extended twice, and the justification given was lack of readiness. What were the metrics from readiness that were used to make this determination that you're aware of? And what was the method that was used to determine whether the metrics have been met or not?
I do believe, and I don't want to paraphrase the work of previous committees, but there was recommendations based on lack of standards of practice, lack of guidelines, lack of adequate training, concern over oversight, and also concern about availability of mental health practitioners were really what drove the recommendations from the last AMAD committee.
So in terms of defining scope of these various areas of deficiencies or gaps or requirements, were there metrics assigned to these in any way, shape, or form so that this time around we could assess movement, improvement?
There were not metrics per se assigned to them, just a general understanding that we had not yet as a country felt like we had met the bar. And so we are now looking at, has the bar moved? But I do not have a baseline nor, an aspirational target to be achieved.
So I'd like to raise the Association of Chairs of Psychiatry in Canada, back in preparation for March 2023, raised a number of recommendations that needed to be implemented before we could move ahead. That we develop expert agreement, an operational definition of irremediality for different mental health disorders, guidelines and procedures, differentiating suicide versus access to MAID, developing standardized education tools for training psychiatrists and other health professionals, and robust processes for data. Would you say we have met?
So we do have Pam Wallen coming up. You can see she's in the hot pink just there to the right, or the left. I don't know how that goes on the screens. She's in the hot pink. Pam Wallen coming up. She's going to have some questions as well. Everybody has questions.
I would say that there is good evidence to show recent progress in that. I would draw to your attention the Canadian Psychiatric Association guidance that does provide practitioners with tools to help assess irremediability, especially that it is, not a yes/no. It is a judgment by the practitioner based on multiple lines of evidence, including whether the individual has had a psychiatric diagnosis, the duration and the severity and the persistence of that suffering related to that diagnosis, their treatment history, that they are in advanced and irreversible decline, and that social conditions should not be mistaken for medical irremediability. So it is providing them with more direction from a clinical practice perspective to guide their work and their advice to the MAID assessor.
Thank you. Our time's up. Senator Wallen, you have the floor for 3 minutes.
Here we go, Pam
Thank
Wallen.
you very much. A quick question to both Ms. Lawley and Ms. Gibner. And this comes out of the discussion around jurisdiction shopping, if I can put it that way. To your knowledge, has anyone been approved for MAID with mental illness being the sole underlying cause in Canada, noting today that it is not yet permissible? Do you have any evidence of that?
To my knowledge, no.
Ms. Gibner?
I would say echo the same. I'm not privy to any of that kind of information, no.
Okay, thank you. So there's nothing on the record about that. The issue of readiness, one of the things that we heard in testimony at the last iteration of this committee was a shortage of practitioners and assessors. And you, Ms. Lawley, have said you think that has been corrected if there's triple the number of people now taking up training and expressing their willingness to be involved.
I think it's important for the committee to recognize that while there has been triple the number of practitioners involved in, the MAID curriculum online and their engagement, I am still hearing very regularly from my counterparts across the country that mental health capacity is a concern. Especially if you consider the Psychiatric Association's guidance that, there has to be a diagnosis, there has to be treatment, there has to be there are a number of things that have to be met before mental illness as a sole underlying condition could be a reason for medical assistance in dying. And so the concern around the country is, do we have the system in place that would have allowed for the supports to that individual for the duration of, their illness? And I would say they are not. That is one point where we're still having active conversations.
And do you believe that by 2027 that situation might have improved?
I would say that the statistics show us that, while we aren't increasing the number of psychiatrists in our country, if I look at CIHI data, it's still below the number of family health practitioners that we are providing. So it is not a significant, it's like a 7% increase.
Okay, and to Ms. Gibner, if I could, just on the, as we've discussed here, provinces can make access more restrictive, but they can't make something that is illegal legal. From a justice point of view, from the point of view of the Constitution and the law and the criminal code, do you think there are enough safeguards in place for MAID to become an option for those whose sole underlying cause is mental illness?
If it's okay, my colleague's going to take that question.
Let's listen to the answer on this. Oh, now the chair is saying there's 5 seconds left.
But I'll give you another 10 or something, so 15 seconds.
I mean, I don't think it's up to us to determine if there's enough safeguards. That's the role of Parliament. Obviously, you can see from other testimony that there is debate, with some people believing fervently that we have enough, such as the expert panel, and others who are questioning that. So you'll have to weigh the evidence from various experts. Unfortunately, we're not in a position to advise on that.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Wells, 3 minutes.
Are you aware that the CPA clinical guidelines do encourage clinicians to review a person's health records, which include past assessments, and this is also clearly communicated in the MAID curriculum and was part of the expert panel recommendations?
I do know that it is in the Canadian Psychiatric Association guidelines because I read them myself the other night, and not as a clinician. I can tell you they're actually very easily understandable, but they are really trying to create a holistic approach and a support for clinicians.
Thank you. When the government extended the exclusion on my question, well, this question was sort of asked, but I want to ask a little bit more about metrics. If you have no metrics, how can we say we do not have enough practitioners? How do you see that sort of connecting the metrics to the practitioners?
I think there's a double jeopardy issue here in place in terms of determining metrics, because we also don't know the demand. So we understand supply. We can tell you how many psychiatrists we have in this country and where they're located and what the regional disparities are. What I can't tell you is what the demand will be should this exemption be lifted, and ergo, would there be enough demand and supply? That is an unknown in this formula that we are solving for.
And so if that were the case, we wouldn't need a legal exclusion then. There wouldn't be enough practitioners to even move forward for some people.
I think that is... I think that is an active conversation that jurisdictions are having, especially low-resource jurisdictions. For instance, Nunavut has no psychiatrists, yet they deliver MAID services to their jurisdictions. And so the conversation around how a psychiatrist perhaps in another jurisdiction could provide advice to a MAID assessor in another jurisdiction, because we do allow for that across our country. We have inter-jurisdictional billing codes. But how you build a system whereby you know how to find that support for you as the MAID assessor is a very active conversation at the PT level right now.
I think the Alberta proposed bill would actually bar that from having outside assessors outside of the province consult with people in the province.
That is actually a question I asked Alberta myself the other day, and because what their legislation says is their MAID assessors, their citizens cannot see MAID assessors in other jurisdictions. Their legislation does not prohibit their psychiatrists from providing advice to other jurisdictions, but we don't know if that was the intent. And so, they're going through their legislative process right now, and it is an active question with that jurisdiction.
Thank you, Senator Wells, and I turn it over again to Senator Martin.
We're going to something
The government
different.
has effectively said its hands are tied on this, that the Supreme Court made a ruling that said the previous regime, which is, I guess, the current regime, was too restrictive, and they've kind of been forced into that. So what's your perspective on that aspect of this?
It's simply nonsense.
I'd like to start with you, Ms. Lawley, because we have heard in the media and a number of other reports of people that have been denied access to MAID in one province but are approved in another. Is there any legal reason that this should be the case under the current system?
I can speak to the health system component. Legal questions I would defer to my colleagues from Justice. Each jurisdiction is able to design a health system to deliver MAID that aligns with what their jurisdiction is asking for, and they can be more strict in their requirements on MAID, but they can't be more permissive. So every jurisdiction has a slightly different approach to the way that it is delivering MAID and the way that its assessment process works. On the question that you have asked specifically to whether a person can be denied in one jurisdiction and then moved to another jurisdiction, it would depend entirely on the situation and whether a person had been, is a citizen of a jurisdiction long enough to be able to access their healthcare system and be able to access their MAID assessment. The assessments are not shared across jurisdictions. The practitioners are not required to reach across jurisdictions.
But if a patient is ineligible in Ontario, they should also be ineligible in British Columbia.
Well, I would say in terms of the delivery of the assessment, there is not a yes-no response for most assessors. They look at the entirety of the information in front of them. And admittedly, assessors would likely find there will be some variability in what assessors would find in the manner in which they have done their assessment. So I can't honestly speak to whether there's a homogeneous approach and a yes/no across the country.
We have a standard in place. We have a threshold by which people are going to be eligible or ineligible for MAID. And I realize that there is some judgment that any physician or assessor has to do. The question I have is, assuming that all the assessors were viewing patients' health records and their interactions with patients in the same way, just in terms of how the system is supposed to work from a design perspective, should there be any difference in eligibility between one province and another?
No, I would say that eligibility is definitely in alignment with the practice standards and the guidelines that are being developed to support the MAID assessors and what is written in the criminal code.
Thank you. So we had one case recently that was reported on widely in the media, Keanu Vafean, 26 years old, denied in Ontario, approved in British Columbia. He had been a long sufferer of mental illness. There were purported claims that he fit into the Track 2 model with a physical comorbidity. But, what do we do to prevent doctor shopping and jurisdiction shopping in the system if we are going to proceed with this expansion as a country to mental illness as a sole underlying criterion?
I can, Chair, assure the committee that the jurisdictions are taking quite seriously any potential jurisdiction shopping or, the opportunity for the bouncing around the country until you find someone to give you, an answer that you're looking for. Because we live in a country where people can change jurisdictions and they can, request MAID through different jurisdictions dependent on the time that they have been in that jurisdiction and their ability to access the healthcare system. What we can do is ensure that there is consistency in the standards of practice, and that is work that we are doing with jurisdictions.
Thank you. I only have a minute left.
Yes,
I'm
there's
hoping
1 minute. Thank you.
Thank you. Do assessors have to take into consideration the number of times someone has been refused MAID by previous assessors?
That is a question I don't know if I'm fully qualified to answer because I don't do MAID assessments myself.
You're representing Health Canada, though. My question is, if someone has been denied 20 times, I feel like that would be relevant information that should form the 21st assessor's view. And you are not aware of any requirement that would have to factor in or that they would even have to be aware of that?
Honestly, I don't know in terms of whether that is in the checklist for the MAID assessors or not.
Would it be relevant to understand for an assessor if someone has been denied in another jurisdiction?
I think, yes, there is a rational logic to that consideration, but I also think it's important to take into consideration that much time could pass between these assessments and people's health may change.
Okay. Smash the like, hit subscribe. We work really hard at this stuff. Let's get back to the video.
Thank you. And we'll go to round 2, 3 minutes for each member. So we'll begin with Ms. Jansen.
Just to the comment from both Ms. Gibner and Ms. Lawley about no actual case that they're aware of. If you look in the Death Review Committee report, there was a Mr. A, experienced suffering, functional decline, and he was given MAID, and there was no pathological findings found for for his decline, other than his COVID-19 shot. So there are cases, and this goes to my question in regards to non-compliance. So, Ms. Lawley, I'll direct it to you. If you wanted to design a system that quietly looks the other way, I'm not sure you could do it much better than what we're seeing here. In Ontario alone, the coroner tracked 428 possible criminal code violations in assisted dying cases over 5 years, 178 in a single year, and out of all of those cases, everyone involving the ending of a human life. Only 4 were referred to a regulatory body, and not one was reported to police, not one. Now, in any other area of law, financial crime, assault, even paperwork violations, hundreds of potential criminal code breaches would trigger investigations, headlines, and consequences. But here, where the stakes are literally life and death, the system seems to do the opposite. It absorbs it, redirects it, keeps it away from the very institutions designed to enforce the law. And then we hear something even more troubling. When we ask basic reasonable questions of this government, which provinces have oversight? Who's reviewing the cases? Are there checks before or after a life is ended? The answer we got back from them is essentially, we don't know, that's up to the provinces. So let's put that together. Hundreds of possible violations, no police involvement, no national tracking, and no clear line of accountability. And now, with some of the most complex, subjective, and difficult to diagnose cases in all of medicine, mental illness, we are being told this same system will somehow suddenly function just fine. Canadians aren't naive. They can see when a system is built to enforce the rules and when it's built to avoid asking too many questions. Right now, this looks like a system that has been structured, intentionally or not, to keep scrutiny at arm's length and enforcement and safeguard out of the room. So before we expand this any further, we need to be honest about what's already happening. And I point to Keanu's case. He did not move to BC. He flew to BC. That's why we're here in this review committee. And the more testimony we hear, the more it seems clear that we're not ready, and likely never to be ready, to expand this to those whose sole underlying condition is mental illness. Is there anything you can say to demonstrate proof of the federal government or Department of Health dealing with hundreds of compliance failures?
Okay, there's actually only about 20 seconds, so maybe yes or no, and a brief example.
I would say to, very valid public interest concerns around safeguards and oversight, that you are right. It is to take another member's use. There is a patchwork of approach to oversight that the federal government does not lead. It is really within the jurisdictions to set up their oversight mechanisms, and they're all slightly different. I would say the one thing about oversight is that the opportunities that the jurisdictions have for kind of the continuous process improvement do play out in our FPT working level. We are sharing that information with each other, and we are learning from each other.
Thank you. And next,
oh yeah,
we'll begin our first round with Mr. Cooper for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. To Dr. Neufeld, in the last panel, Sarah Lawley from Health Canada cited the guidance from the Canadian Psychiatric Association on evaluating irremediability and managing suicide risk as evidence of readiness for the expansion of MAID for mental illness. As the chair of the Association of Chairs of Psychiatry, can you speak to whether this guidance represents a consensus amongst chairs of psychiatry?
It absolutely does not represent any consensus amongst the chairs of psychiatry. In fact, the chairs of psychiatry and the majority do not support the expansion of MAID. In fact, this guidance document has just been published at the very end, the very last day of March. It's not peer-reviewed. And certainly none of us, to my knowledge, were asked to even participate in the process. So it doesn't represent a consensus.
And it's my understanding that there were 8 members who worked on the guidance, all of whom were self-selected. Do I have that right?
I can't speak to how they were selected. But we do know that some of those members are very clearly have been from the outset very interested in expanding MAID. Yes.
And so on the issue of consensus, would it be fair to say that to the degree there's a consensus, it's a consensus of these 8 individuals?
I would imagine so, yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Now, looking at the guidance at the very start, there's a disclaimer that states, quote, "This guidance is not intended to be interpreted or to be used as a standard medical practice." What is the significance of that disclaimer?
Yes, it does make it hard to know how one would decide on how to implement this very final solution in patients. I didn't mean it that way. This very difficult to retract kind of medical decision based on these guidance. Yeah.
Okay. Now, you noted in your brief to the committee that the guidance offers no substantive criteria for determining irremediability. Instead, as you just noted, it copies and pastes Health Canada's model practice standard, which instructs assessors to consider prior treatment attempts, including their duration, intensity, and outcomes, as well as illness severity and duration. Now, you cited an example of a patient, and you also noted in your brief that psychiatric disorders follow non-linear trajectories, that patients frequently improve after years of severe illness, and that treatment resistance does not establish non-recovery. Do I have that right?
Yes.
Okay, so given that, is it fair to say that the factors set out in Health Canada's model practice standard that are copied and pasted into the guidance are not suitable or not appropriate for assessing irremediability in the context of mental illness?
Yes, I believe so. It is really hard to prognosticate based simply on people's history as to whether there are things that still should be tried or things that could still be helpful to somebody.
Now, you further noted in your brief that the guidance provides no clear instruction regarding distinguishing between a rational request for MAID and one motivated by suicidal ideation, and that instead of providing clarity, could actually create conceptual and clinical confusion. Can you elaborate on that point?
Well, I think the patient that I was telling you about really illustrates that. He was not impulsive. I think what I get from this document is that it's that impulsivity that we're warned against reacting to with MAID. In fact, that somebody who's planning to hurt themselves in the next little while, they are not eligible for MAID. But the problem is, as my patient demonstrated, that enduring, stable wish to die might be part of the illness, as it was in his case. Yet that would be considered an appropriate request for MAID.
So to be clear, Dr. Neufeld, is it your professional position that the CPA guidance does not constitute evidence of so-called readiness?
I don't believe it does. No, it certainly doesn't help me understand how this would be implemented.
And Dr. Coelho, is your position the same on that point?
That was perfect timing. Thank you very much. We will.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah. All right, gang, we're going to wrap it up there. Aaron, Kennedy, and Looney. I'm going to take a moment to explain a situation to the members that have paid for memberships or were gifted memberships, whatever. I'm in a bit of a miscommunication with YouTube right now with Big Brother. They've taken away my privileges to have that. And it's just a miscommunication. We'll get it worked out. It'll be back up and better. And anybody that invested in the channel, you'll be compensated for that. I invite you back. It's just, again, it's a miscommunication between me and the big boss. Anyhow, that's it. I hope you've been enjoying the shows. That's it. Thank the moderating team. You're an amazing bunch of people. Love this chat room. No joke. I come and I make these videos so I can have the chat. I love it. It's my outlet. It's great. Anyhow, gang, that's it. Sorry about the memberships, gang. We will get that back up and running, and it'll be better than ever. But anyhow, there's just been some kind of miscommunication between me and the boss. We'll figure it out. That's it. Canadian Looney. We're back this afternoon for a question period, so remember to come back. We will have a couple of videos to show right before question period, and then we'll slam right into that, see what kind of a mess we have on Wacky Wednesday. That's it, gang. Thank you all so much for watching. Aaron, Kennedy, and Looney, we're out. See you this afternoon. Sounds good to me.
You should do exercises. That's important to our good health. And friends, tomorrow we are going to be visiting with a fisherman who will tell us about his very enjoyable hobby. Now, I would like to see you all through our magic mirror. Romper, bumper, stomper, boo, tell me, do. Magic mirror, please tell me today, did all of my friends have fun at play? I see all of my friends in Alberta. It's nice to see you. And I see Dan and Vivian. I see Marlon and Mona. I see Catherine and Harley. I see Anne and Elizabeth and Jane. I see Bert and Nicole, and I see you too. I hope to see you tomorrow, right here in Romper Room. Bing bong, knock knock, hey daddy do. Bing bong, tick tock, bebop.
Kick off your weekend with exciting CFL action when the Edmonton Eskimos tackle the BC Lions in Vancouver. Tomorrow night at 10:30 on CFTO TV.
Appreciate it. We're back this afternoon with question period, guys. Hope to see you there.